She drained our joint account while I was still dodging mortars, then walked into court and called me a deserter. Her lawyer, grinning like he'd already won, rattled off details from my classified deployment logs. Stuff no civilian should have. That's when I knew this wasn't just betrayal. It was an ambush. From my own wife, with inside help. But what they didn't know, I had security cameras running the whole time I was gone. And when I hit play, everything changed. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Marcus Kessler, and I'm 34 years old. After 18 months fixing helicopters in combat zones, I finally made it back to Missouri, only to find divorce papers waiting instead of my wife Sarah's embrace. Our tiny rental house sits empty now, except for the security cameras I installed before deployment. My secret insurance policy against the unknown. My childhood friend Rob, a retired Air Force pilot, warned me about Sarah's strange behavior while I was gone, but I refused to believe it. The joint account I shared with Sarah, meant for our dream home in the foothills, now shows a zero balance. Her last letter still burns in my pocket. Everything will be waiting. She was right about that. Everything was waiting, including her lawyer. But let me start from the beginning. I'd imagined my homecoming 1,000 times during those long nights in the desert. Sarah would be waiting at the airport just like when I left, hair catching the morning light, that smile that made me propose after only 6 months of dating. Maybe we'd grab breakfast at that diner where we first met, the one with the chrome-edged tables and coffee that could strip paint. But reality had other plans. The process server caught me right outside baggage claim. You know that moment when your whole world shifts. Mine came in a manila envelope handed over by some kid who couldn't meet my eyes. Marcus D. Kessler, you've been served. 4 words that hit harder than any mortar round I'd dodged overseas. I stood there, duffel bag cutting into my shoulder, reading and rereading the summons until the words blurred. Civil suit, $50,000, abandonment, spousal support, Sarah's name at the bottom, her signature as sharp as a knife. My hands shook as I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail, just like the last 3 months of deployment. I'd written off those unanswered calls to bad reception, time differences, her busy schedule. Funny how the mind protects you from what it doesn't want to see. 2 days later, I walked into the Greene County Courthouse. The marble floors echoed every footstep like accusations. Ever notice how courthouses always smell the same? Like old paper and broken promises with a hint of lemon cleaner trying to cover it all up. All rise. Judge Harrison peered down from his bench, looking more like a disappointed uncle than the impartial arbiter I needed. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, designer purse at her feet, probably bought with the money she'd drained from our joint account. Her lawyer, some slick piece of work named Davidson, stood ready for battle in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pay. Your Honor, Davidson started, his voice dripping with rehearsed concern. Mrs. Kessler has endured 18 months of complete abandonment, while Mr. Kessler chose to extend his deployment. Objection? My court-appointed lawyer, Peters, finally spoke up. My client's service record clearly shows. Overruled, Judge Harrison cut in. Continue, Mr. Davidson. Davidson smiled like a shark scenting blood. As I was saying, Mr. Kessler's voluntary extension left my client without support, forcing her to deplete their joint savings merely to survive. We're seeking fair compensation for voluntary? The word burst out of me before Peters could stop it. I was serving my country. Mr. Kessler, Judge Harrison warned, you'll speak when addressed. I caught Sarah's eye across the courtroom. She didn't even flinch. Just sat there perfectly composed like we were strangers sharing an elevator. Remember that diner I mentioned? We'd spent our first anniversary there, sharing a slice of apple pie, planning our future. Now she wouldn't even look at me. Furthermore, Davidson continued, we have evidence that Mr. Kessler deliberately avoided communication with his wife during his absence. Phone records show. That's because I was in active combat zones. My fists clenched under the table. Your Honor, I was fixing helicopters under fire. We didn't exactly have reliable cell service. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Kessler, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Mr. Peters, control your client. Peters tugged at my sleeve, whispering urgently, "Let me handle this. Please." The hearing dragged on for another hour. Davidson spun every detail of my service into an indictment. Each medal became proof I chose career over marriage. Every combat zone rotation transformed into evidence I was running away. By the end, I barely recognized my own life story. "We'll reconvene next week," Judge Harrison announced. "Mr. Peters, have your response to these allegations prepared by then." As we filed out, Sarah brushed past me in the hallway. That familiar scent of her perfume, the one I'd dreamed about overseas, now made my stomach turn. She paused, just for a moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, not remorse. Something colder. "Should have stayed overseas, hero," she murmured, then clicked away on heels that probably cost more than my lawyer's retainer. I stood there, combat boots heavy on the polished floor, wondering how the same woman who'd once promised to wait forever now wielded my service like a weapon against me. After that first hearing, I drove straight to the bank. Had to grip the steering wheel tight to keep my hands from shaking. You know that feeling when you already know something's wrong, but your brain keeps trying to sell you hope anyway? The teller's face said it all before she even pulled up our account. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kessler. The joint account was closed 3 months ago." "Closed?" My throat went dry. How much was left when it closed? She tapped at her keyboard, each click like a hammer falling. "The final withdrawal was for $47,132.18. The room tilted sideways. That was everything. My combat pay, hazard bonuses, every extra shift I'd picked up fixing birds in 100-degree heat. 18 months of sweat and sacrifice, gone in one transaction. "Would you like to see the withdrawal slip?" she asked. I nodded, numb. There it was, Sarah's elegant signature, dated exactly 1 week after my last attempted call home. The one where she'd said, "Don't worry about me, just come back safe." Now I understood why she'd sounded so calm. Walking out of the bank, I spotted it, a brand new Mercedes SUV parked right in front of the courthouse. Sarah's dream car, the one we'd talked about saving up for together once I finished my service. Now here it was, gleaming in the Missouri sun, paid for with my deployment savings. I waited by that car for almost an hour. When Sarah finally emerged from the courthouse, she didn't even look surprised to see me, just adjusted her designer sunglasses and kept walking, heels clicking on the pavement like she was on a runway instead of a battlefield. "That's what you did with our savings?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. 18 months of combat pay? She ran her hand along the car's polished hood. "Our savings? You mean the money I earned by being a military wife? By putting my life on hold while you played hero overseas?" Played hero? Something hot and tight coiled in my chest. "I was serving our country, Sarah. We talked about this before I enlisted. You said you understood. I understood you chose the military over me." She clicked her key fob, the car chirping to life. "Just like you chose to extend your tour without even asking me. That wasn't a choice. We lost 2 mechanics in an attack. The unit needed." "The unit needed?" She laughed, but it wasn't the warm sound I remembered from our early days. "I needed my husband, but you were too busy collecting medals to notice." I stepped closer, trying to find any trace of the woman I'd married in those cold eyes. "What happened to you?" "I grew up." She opened the car door, the leather interior, that new car smell wafting out. "Maybe you should try it sometime instead of hiding behind that uniform." "Hiding?" My hands clenched into fists. "I was dodging mortars while you were emptying our account. Should have stayed overseas, hero." She slid into the driver's seat, that smirk still playing on her lips. "At least there you knew who your enemies were." The Mercedes purred to life and she pulled away, leaving me standing there in the courthouse parking lot. The same lot where 3 years ago we'd celebrated after signing the papers for our first home together. Now all I had were ghosts and a bank account as empty as her promises. That night I lay awake in my cheap motel room, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. The AC rattled like distant gunfire, and for a moment I was back in my bunk overseas counting down the days until I could come home. Except home wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield I never saw coming. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her signature on that withdrawal slip, heard her voice calling me hero like it was a curse. The worst part? She was using my service, the very thing I'd been proud of, the duty I'd sworn to uphold, as a weapon against me. Every mission, every extension, every sacrifice was being twisted into proof of abandonment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd survived 18 months in a combat zone only to find the real war waiting for me in a Missouri courthouse, dressed in designer clothes and driving my savings away in a Mercedes. 2 weeks after that parking lot showdown, I was back in court. Same wooden benches, same stale air, same knot in my gut. You know that feeling when you're doing a pre-flight check and something's just off? That's how it hit me the moment Sarah's lawyer opened his mouth. Your Honor, on March 12th, while stationed at Forward Operating Base Echo, Mr. Kessler voluntarily extended his tour by 6 months. The lawyer, Davidson, adjusted his tie with manicured fingers. This was after declining 3 separate opportunities for early rotation back to Travis Air Force Base. My head snapped up. Those dates weren't public record. Hell, FOB Echo wasn't even officially acknowledged in mission briefings. I glanced at my own lawyer, watching him scribble notes without catching the red flag. Furthermore, Davidson continued, on April 23rd, Mr. Kessler accepted additional duties as lead maintenance officer for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, knowing this would require him to remain in theater for objection. My lawyer finally spoke up, but for the wrong reason. Relevance? Goes to pattern of behavior, Your Honor. Davidson's smile reminded me of oil on water, demonstrating Mr. Kessler's consistent choice to remain separated from his wife, despite viable alternatives. The judge nodded. Overruled. Continue. I barely heard the rest. My mind was racing through security protocols, clearance levels, classification grades. The 160th assignment? That was eyes-only information, buried in encrypted files that needed special authorization just to access. Yet this civilian lawyer was rattling it off like a grocery list. Mr. Kessler? The judge's voice cut through my thoughts. Do you dispute these dates? No, Your Honor. I kept my voice steady, military calm. But I'd like to know how opposing counsel obtained classified deployment records. Davidson's smile didn't waver. All information was legally obtained through proper channels, Your Honor. Proper channels, my ass. I'd spent enough time around helicopters to know when someone was blowing smoke. The dates, the base names, the unit assignments, this was inside information. Someone with clearance was feeding Sarah's team details about my service record. During the recess, I cornered my lawyer in the hallway. Those were classified details. He shouldn't have access to any of that. He shrugged, loosening his discount rack tie. Military records get declassified all the time. Nothing we can do about it now. But that wasn't how it worked. Not for recent deployments, not for special operations units, and definitely not for FOB locations. The smell of coffee from the courthouse cafe triggered a memory. Late nights in the maintenance bay, filling out mission logs in duplicate. 1 copy for command, 1 for the secure server. The only people with access were unit leaders, base commanders, and... My stomach dropped. The JAG office. Military lawyers who processed everything from disciplinary actions to combat pay distributions. The same office that would have handled my marriage status during deployment. That night, in my motel room, I spread out every document I had from my service time. Deployment orders, transfer papers, commendation letters, looking for patterns, connections, anything that might explain how Sarah's lawyer knew things he shouldn't. The AC hummed like distant rotors as I pieced it together. Sarah had filed for the civil suit exactly 3 weeks after my last mission log was uploaded to the system. She'd known exactly when to strike, exactly what to claim, and exactly which details would make me look worse to a civilian judge. This wasn't just an angry ex looking for a payday. The timing was too perfect, the intel too precise. Someone inside the military legal system was helping her, probably the same someone who'd told her exactly when to empty our accounts. I thought about Sarah's smirk in the parking lot. Should have stayed overseas, hero. She'd known she had me outflanked before I even landed. The question was, who was running this operation? A corrupt JAG officer? Someone at the courthouse with military connections? My phone buzzed. Another email from my lawyer about upcoming court dates. I ignored it, focusing instead on my old mission logs. 3 years of service, compressed into manila folders and digital files. Somewhere in this paper trail was the thread that would unravel everything. I just had to find it. The real kick in the teeth? Every time Sarah's lawyer quoted another classified detail, he wasn't just attacking me. He was betraying everything that uniform stood for. Someone who'd sworn to protect and serve was selling out a veteran for profit. I'd learned in the Air Force that the most dangerous enemies aren't always the ones shooting at you. Sometimes they're the ones wearing friendly uniforms, sitting behind desks, handling your paperwork. And right now, one of them was using my service record as ammunition against me. I was staring at deployment logs until my eyes burned, wondering if I'd finally cracked under the pressure. The motel room walls felt like they were closing in. You know that feeling? When every thread you pull just tangles the mess even worse? The knock at my door made me jump. Just the evening clerk with fresh towels. I'd been holed up here 3 days straight, living on vending machine coffee and determination. The familiar scent of industrial laundry soap took me right back to base housing, back when clean sheets and a solid roof meant home. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Marcus Kessler? Speaking. I rubbed my eyes, checking my watch. Past midnight. Rob Granger here. We met in Kandahar. I was flying Chinooks while you were keeping them airborne. His gravelly voice carried that unmistakable pilot's confidence. Got a minute? The name clicked. Rob, the old-timer with the bomber jacket who'd bought me a beer after I'd worked triple shifts to fix his bird's transmission. Yeah, sure, what's up? Heard about your situation through the grapevine. Sarah Walcott, ring any bells? My throat tightened. That's my wife's maiden name. Figured. He sighed heavily. Listen, son, you're not gonna like what I'm about to tell you, but you need to hear it. My nephew Tommy, he went through something similar 3 years back. Different name, same playbook. I sat up straighter, papers scattering across the bed. What do you mean? Young guy, fresh out of deployment. Wife files civil suit claiming abandonment, demands back support. Lawyer shows up with classified intel he shouldn't have. Ring any bells? My hands were shaking. Davidson, tall guy, expensive suit. Looks like he irons his tie. That's him. Rob's voice hardened. Tommy lost everything. House, savings. Damn near lost his mind trying to figure out how they knew things about his service record that even his CO didn't know. I grabbed a pen, started taking notes. What happened? By the time we connected the dots, it was too late. She'd already moved on to her next target, changed her name, switched states, same routine. He paused. Marcus, she's done this before. You're not her first target. The room tilted sideways. All those nights wondering if I was paranoid, if I was seeing conspiracies where there were none. They crashed down like dominoes. How many others? We know of 3 for sure. Probably more we haven't found yet. She picks guys who are deployed long-term, usually special operations or support. Guys who can't easily defend themselves in court. My mouth went dry. And Davidson? Always the same lawyer. Always has inside information he shouldn't. We tried reporting it, but without hard evidence. He trailed off. I thought about those security cameras I'd installed before deployment. Rob, if someone had proof, actual recordings, what would that be worth? Depends what's on them. His tone sharpened. You got something? Maybe. I glanced at my laptop. I need to check some files first. Listen carefully, Marcus. These people, they're organized. They know the system, know how to work it. Tommy tried fighting back alone. Cost him everything. The weight of what I was up against settled like lead in my stomach. Why are you telling me this? Because I watched one good man go down to these vultures. Not happening again. Papers rustled on his end. I've got some contacts in JAG. People I trust. Give me 24 hours to make some calls. Hope flickered. Dangerous, fragile hope. I've got a hearing in 9 days. Then we've got 8 days to build a case that'll stick. Check those files. Don't tell anyone what you find, not even your lawyer. I'll call back tomorrow, same time. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, letting it all sink in. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She'd made a career of it. Each deployment, each soldier's trust, each sacred bond between husband and wife, all just moves in her game. The air conditioning kicked on, humming like distant rotors. Outside, cars swooshed past on wet pavement. Normal sounds, normal night. But nothing would ever be normal again. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Somewhere in my hard drive were hundreds of hours of security footage. If Sarah and Davidson had ever met in my house, ever discussed their plans, the camera system had been my paranoid precaution. Now it might be my only chance at justice. I started the file transfer, watching the progress bar inch forward. 8 days to save myself, and maybe stop them from destroying anyone else. The security system. I'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos, a last-minute installation before deployment. You know how your mind works when you're heading overseas. Every possible scenario plays through your head like a worst-case highlight reel. I'd mounted cameras in the living room, kitchen, and entryway. Nothing creepy, just basic surveillance with audio backup. Sarah had rolled her eyes when I showed her. Seriously? Who's going to break in? I remembered mumbling something about peace of mind, but really? Deep down, some part of me must have known. Maybe that's why my hands were shaking as I pulled into her driveway at 2 a.m. The house looked different. New flowers in the beds, fresh paint on the shutters. Like she'd been washing away any trace of me. I sat there for a moment, key in hand, wondering if I had the right to go in. Then I remembered the papers she'd served me with and steeled myself. The spare key was still hidden behind the loose brick. Guess she hadn't found that one. Inside, everything smelled wrong. Designer candles instead of motor oil and coffee. Fancy throw pillows where my old recliner used to be. But the network hub was right where I'd left it, humming away in the basement utility closet. I plugged in my laptop, started the file transfer. Hundreds of hours of footage. The system was set to overwrite after 6 months, but if I was lucky. You ever spend all night sorting through digital files? It's like looking for a specific grain of sand on a beach. My eyes burned, but I couldn't stop. Dawn was creeping through the basement windows when I found it. The timestamp read March 15th, 3 months before she filed the lawsuit. Sarah was sitting on our couch, my couch, wine glass in hand. And there was Davidson, looking relaxed as could be in his $1,000 suit, checking his phone like he owned the place. So we're clear on the timeline? Sarah's voice came through crystal clear. She was using that tone I knew too well, the one that meant she had everything figured out. Marcus won't be back until August. Davidson nodded, swirling his wine. Perfect. We file in July, catch him off guard right when he lands. Military types, they're always disoriented that first week back. Makes them easier to manipulate in court. My stomach turned. I'd thought I was prepared for anything, but hearing them discuss me like I was just another mark. Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. God, you should have seen his face when I told him I'd wait forever. These military boys, they're all the same. So desperate to believe in loyalty. Speaking of loyalty, Davidson set down his glass. You're sure about Judge Matthews? Please. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. He owes me after what happened with his daughter's DUI last year. One call from me and those charges disappeared like magic. She leaned forward, grinning. Trust me, he'll play ball. The footage kept rolling, but I couldn't watch anymore. I sat there in the dark, letting the reality sink in. This wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy. They'd planned everything. The timing, the emotional manipulation, even the judge. How many other soldiers had they done this to? How many other lives had they carved up and served to the highest bidder? I checked the timestamp again. March 15th. The day I'd been getting mortared in Kandahar, working 18 hours straight to keep our birds in the air. While I was fixing helicopter rotors with bleeding hands, she was here, plotting to strip me of everything I'd earned. My phone buzzed. Rob's number. I answered, voice rough. I found it. Found what? Everything. I started copying the files to a secure drive. Sarah, Davidson, the judge, it's all on video. They planned the whole thing months ago. Silence on the line. Then, how solid is the footage? Crystal clear. Time-stamped. They're sitting in my living room drinking wine, laughing about how they're going to blindside me. My hands were steady now, anger burning away the shock. They even talk about having the judge in their pocket. Don't move. Rob's voice was pure steel. Don't tell anyone. Don't upload it anywhere. I'm calling my JAG contact right now. This changes everything. I must have watched that footage 20 times that morning. Each replay made my hands shake a little more, but I couldn't stop. It was like picking at a scab. Painful, but somehow necessary. The sun had fully risen, painting the basement walls in harsh light by the time I finally shut the laptop. You know that moment when you realize just how deep the rabbit hole goes? When every suspicious detail suddenly clicks into place? That's where I was, sitting in my old utility closet surrounded by the gentle hum of electronics that had caught my wife plotting to destroy me. I grabbed an old legal pad from my deployment bag and started transcribing everything, word for word. Timestamps, body language. The way Sarah's laugh echoed through the room when Davidson mentioned military types. The casual way they discussed Judge Matthews like he was just another piece on their chessboard. My handwriting got messier as I went, but I kept going. Had to make sure every detail was preserved. Remember those field maintenance logs we had to keep in the Air Force? Every bolt, every inspection documented down to the minute? This was like that. Only instead of helicopter parts, I was cataloging the exact moment my marriage died. 9 days, I muttered to myself, checking the court schedule for the 100th time. The next hearing was set for June 15th at 9 a.m. sharp. 9 days to figure out how to use this without it blowing up in my face. The thing about evidence this explosive, you can't just walk into court and drop it like a grenade. I'd seen enough JAG briefings to know that improperly handled evidence, even rock-solid stuff, could get thrown out faster than bad fuel. And with a judge potentially compromised, this was way above my pay grade. I made 3 copies of everything. One went onto an encrypted hard drive that I'd kept from my deployment days. Another onto a secure cloud server Rob had recommended, the kind with servers in countries I couldn't pronounce. The third copy, let's just say there are places in Missouri where things stay hidden until you need them. The footage itself was damning enough, but it was that casual mention of Judge Matthews that kept eating at me. He owes me after what happened with his daughter's DUI last year. Sarah's words played on loop in my head. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a judge being compromised, about the whole system being rigged. Rob called again around noon. My JAG contact wants to meet. Tonight. You free? My laugh probably sounded a bit unhinged. Rob, I haven't slept in 36 hours. I'm running on coffee and rage. But yeah, I'm free. Good. Because this isn't just about your case anymore. If what you found is legitimate, and I mean rock-solid legitimate, we're talking judicial misconduct, conspiracy, maybe even UCMJ violations if they've been targeting active service members. I rubbed my eyes trying to focus. You think there are others? Marcus, guys like Davidson don't build elaborate schemes for one payday. They perfect their playbook over time. And if they've got a judge helping them, he let that hang there for a moment. Just be at O'Malley's at 8. Bring everything you've got. After hanging up, I sat there in the basement for a long while, just breathing. The utility closet still smelled like my old toolbox, metal and oil and honest work. Sarah had always hated that smell. Funny how clear things become in hindsight. 9 days. 9 days to turn this evidence into ammunition. 9 days to figure out how deep this conspiracy went. 9 days to make sure Sarah and Davidson didn't just walk away to target another soldier. I packed up my laptop, tucked the hard drive into my jacket pocket, and took one last look around the basement. The security system was still humming away, recording new footage I'd probably never see. Part of me wondered what Sarah would think when she realized those cameras had been watching all along. That her perfect plan had been undone by the same military attention to detail she'd always mocked. The irony would have been sweeter if I wasn't so damn tired. I headed upstairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. 8 hours until the meeting. Just enough time to grab some sleep, shower, and prepare myself for whatever came next. Because one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't just about saving my own skin anymore. This was about making sure Sarah, Davidson, and Judge Matthews couldn't do this to anyone else. O'Malley's was exactly the kind of place you'd expect retired military to gather. Dark wood, service patches on the walls, and enough privacy between booths that no one could overhear your conversation unless you wanted them to. The kind of place where stories stayed buried. I arrived early, found a corner booth, and ordered coffee. Black, like the circles under my eyes. The few hours of sleep I'd managed hadn't done much to clear my head, but at least my hands had stopped shaking. Rob walked in at exactly 8, followed by a tall man in a pressed suit that somehow still managed to look military. Everything about him screamed JAG, the ramrod posture, the calculating eyes, the way he scanned the room before committing to a seat. Rob made the introductions. Marcus, meet Colonel James Harrison, retired. Jim, this is the guy I told you about. The colonel's handshake was firm but not showy. Rob says you've got yourself a situation. That's putting it mildly, sir. I pulled out my laptop and the external drive. He held up a hand. Before we get into details, 2 things. First, drop the sir. I retired years ago. Second, I need you to understand something. He leaned forward, voice dropping. If what Rob told me is true, we're not just talking about your divorce case. We're talking about potentially exposing systemic corruption in the judicial system. That means powerful people with resources and connections. Are you prepared for what that might mean? The coffee in my stomach turned acidic. You mean retaliation? I mean everything. Legal fees, professional consequences, your name in the papers, the works. He sat back. I've seen cases like this before. Sometimes the people who expose corruption end up paying a higher price than the corrupt. I thought about Sarah's smirk in the courtroom, about the deployment savings she'd stolen, about other veterans who might be in her crosshairs. With respect, sir, I mean James, I've already lost everything that matters. What's left to take? Something in his expression shifted. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He nodded to Rob. You were right about this one. For the next hour, I laid it all out. The security footage, the conversation between Sarah and Davidson, the judge's name being dropped, the timeline of events. Harrison took notes in a small leather book, his handwriting precise and unhurried. When I finished, he closed the notebook. The footage is admissible. You owned the house, installed the system legally, and there's no reasonable expectation of privacy for criminal conspiracy. He tapped his fingers on the table. But timing is crucial. We need to present this in a way that prevents them from burying it. How do we do that? We don't file it through normal channels. We bring it directly to the state's Judicial Ethics Board. Once it's in their system, Davidson can't make it disappear. He pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. I've got connections there, people who take judicial corruption very seriously. Rob, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke up. Jim's being modest. He's put away 3 corrupt judges in his career. Made some enemies doing it too. Harrison shrugged. The law's the law. Doesn't matter what uniform you wear, or what bench you sit behind. So you'll help? I tried to keep the desperation out of my voice. He studied me for a long moment. Yes, but not just because of your case. This kind of operation, targeting service members, using inside information, having a judge in their pocket, it's organized, professional, the kind of thing that only works if you've done it before. He slid the business card across the table. We're going to shut them down. All of them. Relief hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. Thank you. I mean it. Don't thank me yet. The next few weeks are going to be hell. But if we do this right, he allowed himself a small smile. Let's just say I've been looking for a case like this for a long time. We spent another hour going over strategy, timing, documentation. Harrison's mind was like a tactical computer, mapping out every possible angle, every potential response. By the time we finished, my coffee was cold and my hand was cramped from taking notes. As we stood to leave, Harrison put a hand on my shoulder. One more thing, Marcus. From here on out, you tell no one about this. Not friends, not family, not even your current lawyer. The element of surprise is our biggest advantage. I nodded. Like I said, I've got nothing left to lose. Good. His eyes hardened. Let's blow this open. 9 days flew by like smoke. Before I knew it, I was back in that familiar courtroom, only this time with Harrison beside me instead of my old lawyer. You know that calm you feel right before a storm? That's what it felt like. Everything too quiet, too still. Sarah sat across the aisle, perfect as always in a navy blazer that probably cost more than my car. Davidson, her lawyer, was shuffling papers with the kind of confidence that comes from never losing. The judge looked bored, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Harrison squeezed my shoulder as we stood. "Remember what we discussed. No matter what happens, keep your face neutral." The judge settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and peered down at us. "I understand the defense has new evidence they wish to present?" Davidson was on his feet before the judge finished speaking. "Your Honor, I must object. Any new evidence at this stage is highly irregular. The discovery period closed weeks ago." Harrison rose slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, this evidence only recently came to light, and its relevance to the case is—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Absolutely critical to the administration of justice." "Your Honor," Davidson started again. "Mr. Davidson," the judge cut in, "I haven't ruled yet." He turned to Harrison. "Counselor, what exactly is this evidence?" "Security footage, Your Honor, from the plaintiff's residence, dated 3 months before this case was filed." Sarah's perfectly manicured hand twitched on the table. Just a tiny movement, but I caught it. "Objection." Davidson's face was getting red. "Any such footage would have been obtained without my client's knowledge or consent." Harrison's voice stayed steady. "The cameras were legally installed by Mr. Kessler in his own home, Your Honor. He retained full property rights throughout his deployment. There was no expectation of privacy for activities conducted in common areas." The judge frowned, fingers drumming on his desk. "Mr. Davidson? Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to ambush my client. If such footage exists, it should have been disclosed during discovery." "The footage was recovered last week," Harrison countered. "And given its content, I believe the court will understand why we chose to present it directly, rather than through normal channels." Something in Harrison's tone made the judge pause. He studied both lawyers, then Sarah, then me. "I'll allow it. But this better be relevant, Counselor." Harrison nodded to our tech specialist, who connected a laptop to the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered to life, showing my living room from the corner camera's view. Sarah's face went still as stone when she recognized the scene. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. 3 months before she filed. There she was, sitting on my couch, our couch, with Davidson, wine glasses in hand, laughing. The audio kicked in, crystal clear. "He won't suspect a thing," Sarah was saying. "He's too busy playing hero overseas to check the accounts." Davidson on screen topped off her wine. "And you're sure about Judge Matthews?" "Please." Sarah's recorded voice dripped confidence. "He still owes me for that thing with his daughter last summer. One call from me and he'll sign whatever we put in front of him." The real Judge Matthews, the same man sitting on the bench right now, went pale as chalk. "Shut it off," Davidson shouted, standing so fast his chair tipped over. "This is inadmissible. This is—" "Sit down, Mr. Davidson," Judge Matthews said. His voice shook slightly. The footage continued. Sarah and Davidson discussed splitting my deployment pay, laughed about other veterans they'd targeted, mapped out exactly how they'd manipulate the system. I kept my face neutral, just like Harrison told me. But inside, I was remembering every night I'd spent in the desert, every mortar that screamed overhead, every letter I'd written home to a wife who was already plotting to destroy me. The courtroom had gone dead silent except for the audio playback. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her hands frozen above her keyboard. Finally, Harrison stopped the video. "Your Honor, we have another 47 minutes of footage. Would you like us to continue?" Judge Matthews's hands were trembling as he removed his glasses. "No, Counselor. I believe we've seen enough." He looked at Sarah, then Davidson, then back at his bench. "This court is in recess. Bailiff, please ensure all parties remain in the building and," he swallowed hard, "contact the State Ethics Board immediately." Sarah's perfect mask finally cracked. She turned to Davidson, who wouldn't meet her eyes. As the bailiff approached their table, Harrison leaned close to me. "Now we wait." The next hour felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The bailiff kept Sarah and Davidson cornered in a side room, while suited officials hurried in and out of the judge's chambers. Every few minutes another phone would ring, another whispered conversation would spark. You could feel the shockwaves spreading through the courthouse's old bones. Ever notice how some moments feel like they're happening to someone else? Like you're watching your own life through a window? That's how it felt, sitting there on that hard wooden bench watching my wife's perfect world crumble. The same woman who'd smiled at me through video calls while planning my financial execution was now trapped in a box of her own making. Rob appeared around noon, coffee in hand. "Thought you could use this," he said, settling next to me. The cup was warm against my palm, familiar. Reminded me of those pre-dawn maintenance checks in Kandahar, when the desert night still had teeth. "Thanks." I took a sip. "For everything." He just nodded, understanding all the things I wasn't saying. Harrison emerged from a conference room around 2, looking tired but satisfied. "Judge Matthews just submitted his resignation," he said quietly. "Effective immediately. The ethics board already had a file on him. This was just the final nail." "And Davidson?" "State Bar's emergency suspension order came through 20 minutes ago. He can't practice until there's a full investigation." Harrison's weathered face creased into something between a smile and a grimace. "Though between you and me, he'll be lucky if he ever sees the inside of a courtroom again except as a defendant." I thought about all those nights I'd spent rebuilding helicopter engines, knowing one loose bolt could end lives. Funny how the same principle applied here. One loose thread, pulled at the right moment, and the whole corrupt machine fell apart. A young clerk appeared, papers in hand. "Mr. Kessler?" "The acting judge has signed these." She passed them to Harrison, who reviewed them quickly. "Case dismissed with prejudice," he confirmed. "They're also ordering Sarah to repay your legal fees, $13,700. He paused. "It's not the full amount she took, but it's enough," I said. Because it was. This was never about money. Through the courthouse windows, I could see reporters gathering. Someone had tipped them off, probably one of the clerks. Their cameras caught Sarah leaving through a side door, her designer purse clutched like a shield. She didn't look back, didn't try to explain, just disappeared into a waiting car, leaving her lawyer to face the press alone. Remember those war movies where the dust settles and everyone checks themselves for wounds? That's what the next few hours felt like. Harrison handled the paperwork. Rob made calls to his JAG contacts, ensuring everything was properly documented. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. By sunset, the story was breaking across local news. Veteran exposes courthouse corruption. Judge resigns amid scandal. Lawyer suspended after targeting service members. Each headline felt like another brick falling from the wall Sarah had built around her lies. "You know what happens next, right?" Rob asked as we finally walked out into the cooling evening air. I nodded. The state investigation would expand. They'd find other veterans who'd been targeted, other cases where Judge Matthews had done favors. The system would clean house not because it wanted to, but because it had to. Sometimes the best disinfectant really is sunlight. Harrison caught up with us in the parking lot. "The DA wants to meet tomorrow," he said. "There might be criminal charges given the conspiracy element and the manipulation of federal service records." I thought about Sarah sitting in a defendant's chair, facing the same system she'd tried to weaponize. But the image didn't bring any satisfaction, just a tired kind of clarity. "I'll be there," I said. "But after that, I'm done." Both men looked at me questioningly. "I've got enough of her money back to make a down payment on something small, maybe that cabin up by the lake I talked about." I managed a small smile. "Think I'm ready for some quiet." Rob clapped my shoulder. "You earned it, brother." The sun was setting behind the courthouse, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple I hadn't seen since my last night in the desert. But this time, the war really was over. And I'd won it the same way I'd survived overseas, by keeping my head clear, trusting the right people, and never abandoning my principles. In the distance, I could hear more reporters arriving, hungry for details. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight belonged to peace. 2 weeks after the courthouse drama, I stood in front of a weathered for sale sign, clutching a set of keys that actually meant something. The cabin wasn't much, just under 1,000 square feet of knotty pine and potential, but it was mine. No lawyers, no judges, no betrayals, just a piece of land overlooking Lake Thompson, far enough from town to forget but close enough if I needed supplies. The realtor had called it a handyman special. That suited me fine. After years of keeping Blackhawks flying through sandstorms, A few loose shingles and creaky floorboards didn't scare me. Besides, I needed the work. Needed to feel useful again. "What do you think, buddy?" I asked Duke, the German Shepherd mix I'd adopted from the county shelter last week. He wagged his tail, already marking the property line like he owned it. Maybe he did. He'd been abandoned too, left behind when his family moved away. Now we were both starting over. The cabin's previous owner had been a retired park ranger who'd passed away last winter. His kids lived out of state and just wanted a quick sale. Their loss was my gain. $13,700 covered the down payment with enough left for basic repairs. The bank approved my VA loan without flinching. Funny how having your name cleared makes everything easier. First order of business was security. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. This time I went digital. Cameras with night vision, motion sensors, everything feeding to my phone. The installation guy raised an eyebrow when I asked for backup power supplies, but he didn't argue. Some habits die hard. "Military?" he asked, noticing my stance. "Something like that." He nodded, didn't press. That's what I liked about being up here. People minded their own business. The work filled my days. Replace rotted boards on the deck. Seal the windows against mountain winds. Clear brush from the property line. Each task felt like reclaiming something I'd lost overseas, something Sarah had tried to take. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple satisfaction of knowing what's yours is actually yours. Duke helped in his own way, chasing squirrels and keeping me company while I worked. He had nightmares sometimes. I'd hear him whimpering in his sleep. I knew the feeling. But during the day, he was pure joy, splashing in the lake, bringing me sticks, reminding me that life's pretty simple if you let it be. Remember those quiet moments between missions, when the desert night wrapped around you like a blanket, and you could almost believe in peace. The lake gave me that feeling again, especially at sunrise when mist rose off the water and birds called across the silence. No mortars, no lawyers, no betrayals. Just me, my dog, and the knowledge that I'd earned this moment. This morning was like that. I sat on the newly stained deck, coffee warming my hands, watching dawn paint the sky in colors you can't describe unless you've seen them. Duke lay at my feet, content in that way only dogs can be. Below us, fish jumped on the lake, sending ripples across the surface like nature's radar. The security system's green lights blinked steadily in the half-dark. Not because I was afraid anymore, but because I'd learned. Trust is good, verification is better. The cameras caught deer mostly, sometimes a curious bear. Once, a lost hiker who needed directions, but never threats, never lies. My phone buzzed, Rob checking in. He did that every few days, making sure I was settling in. Good man. Loyal. The kind you want in your corner when the world goes sideways. "How's the cabin?" his text read. I snapped a picture of the sunrise and sent it back. Sometimes words just get in the way. Duke's ears perked up as an eagle swooped low over the water, hunting breakfast. The morning mist was burning off now, revealing the far shore where other cabins dotted the tree line. Neighbors, but distant ones. Perfect. I scratched behind Duke's ears, feeling the solid warmth of him. "This is it, boy," I said quietly. "This is home." He thumped his tail against the deck boards, agreeing in his own way. Above us, the eagle screamed victory. He'd caught his fish. Below, the lake rippled with possibilities. And me? For the first time since stepping off that transport plane, I felt like myself again. Not a victim, not a target, just a man on his own land, facing a new day with clear eyes and steady hands. The sun cleared the eastern ridge, flooding the deck with golden light. Duke stretched, ready for his morning walk. "Time to patrol our perimeter," he seemed to say. I smiled, grabbed his leash, and stood up straight. Some habits are worth keeping. I was grilling burgers when Duke's bark pulled my attention to the TV through the cabin window. The evening news ticker caught my eye. Local attorney disbarred, wife charged in veteran fraud scheme. My spatula froze mid-flip. There she was, Sarah's mugshot filling the screen. Gone was the carefully styled blonde hair and practiced smile. The woman staring back at the camera looked smaller somehow, defeated. Her eyes had that hollow look I'd seen too many times in the mirror during those first dark days after coming home. Sarah Kessler, 33, faces multiple charges including conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted theft by deception, the anchor announced. Sources say the scheme targeted military personnel during overseas deployments. I turned down the heat on the grill and stepped inside, Duke padding after me. The story unfolded in crisp bullet points. How she'd worked with the lawyer to exploit deployment paperwork, how they'd targeted other service members before me, how the judge's resignation had sparked a wider investigation. They even had footage of Sarah being led out of her office in handcuffs, head down, no comment. You know that feeling when a mortar hits nearby and everything goes quiet for a second? That's how it felt watching her fall apart on screen. Not satisfaction exactly, not pity either. Just stillness. My phone started buzzing with notifications. Rob had seen it too. Justice served. You good? Yeah, I texted back. I'm good. More messages poured in. Guys from my unit, neighbors, even Sarah's old friends. They'd all seen the news. Some offered support, others wanted gossip. Most just expressed shock. How could she? They'd thought they knew her. Welcome to the club. Duke whined at my feet, reminding me about those burgers still on the grill. Right there with you, buddy? While I finished cooking, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up Sarah's social media, something I hadn't done since before the court date. Her carefully curated image was crumbling in real time. Comments flooded every post. Can't believe you tried to rob your own husband while he served overseas. Disgusting. Hope it was worth it. Always knew something was off about you. Her friend count was dropping by the minute. The same people who'd liked her missing my hero post during my deployment were now sharing the news story with angry emojis. Even her company's website had quietly removed her profile from their staff page. The burgers were done. I plated them up. One for me, one for Duke, don't judge, and sat on the deck. The lake stretched out calm and dark, reflecting stars like bits of shrapnel caught in silk. A loon called somewhere in the distance. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. The text read, I'm sorry. For everything. I deleted it without responding. Some bridges stay burned. Later that night I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt or worry. Those demons had finally quieted. No, I was restless because part of me had expected to feel different. Vindicated, maybe. Triumphant. Instead, I just felt clear. Like when you finally clean a windshield you didn't even realize was dirty. I got up and walked to the window. Security lights cast soft green dots across the property. Duke lifted his head from his bed, decided nothing needed guarding, and went back to sleep. Smart dog. The news would cycle on. Sarah would face her charges. The system would do its job without any more help from me. That's what separated justice from revenge. Justice works in daylight, with clean hands and clear eyes. My deployment photos still hung on the wall, not because I couldn't let go, but because they reminded me of something important. In every shot, no matter how bad things got, we stood together, had each other's backs. The unit survived because we stayed honest, stayed loyal. Sarah had chosen a different path. She'd played games with people's lives, twisted truth into weapons. And in the end, that same truth had turned on her like a snake. No dramatic showdown needed, no elaborate payback plot. Just facts in black and white, consequences following actions, daylight burning away shadows. The loon called again across the water. Duke twitched in his sleep, chasing dream rabbits. And me? I watched the security lights blink steadily in the dark, not because I was afraid anymore, but because they reminded me. Sometimes the best defense is simply letting the truth stand in plain sight. Morning came soft over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and rose I hadn't seen since sunrise watch in Kandahar. Only this time there weren't any choppers to fix or mortars to dodge. Just Duke curled up at my feet and a fishing pole propped against the railing. The coffee in my thermos still steamed. Funny how something so simple could feel like luxury after everything. Back in the sandbox, we'd have killed for a cup this good. Now I could sit here all morning, watching ripples spread across the surface while my line drifted with the current. Duke's ears perked up at a splash near the cattails, probably that blue heron I'd been seeing lately. The dog had gotten used to our morning routine. Wake up early, grab the thermos and pole, then claim our spot on the dock while the rest of the world slept. Sometimes we'd catch something. Most times we didn't. Didn't matter much either way. The breeze picked up, sending little waves lapping against the pilings. Made me think about waves of a different kind, how close I'd come to drowning in them. Not in some far-off combat zone, but right here at home. The lawsuit, the emptied accounts, Sarah's smirk in that courtroom. For a while there, it felt like everything I'd built was sliding away like sand through my fingers. You want to know the crazy part? Even after finding that security footage, even after watching her scheme fall apart in court, there was still this tiny voice wondering if I'd done the right thing. That's what war does to you. Makes you second-guess the clearest choices. Makes you wonder if maybe you're the one who crossed some line. A fish tugged at my line, then thought better of it. Duke lifted his head, hopeful, then settled back down with a sigh when nothing came of it. Smart dog. He knew the difference between a real bite and a false alarm. Took me longer to learn that lesson with people. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. Through the trees I could just make out my cabin's roof. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No joint accounts, no hidden agendas, just honest wood and nails, standing exactly where and what it claimed to be. The security cameras were still there, of course. Not because I was paranoid, but because they'd taught me something valuable. Truth doesn't hide. It sits in plain sight, patient as a fisherman, waiting for the right moment to surface. Another splash. Closer this time. Duke's tail thumped against the dock boards, but he stayed put. Good boy. He'd learned, same as me, that some things are worth waiting for. Peace. Justice. The kind of quiet morning where your biggest worry is whether the fish are biting. The breeze rustled through the trees again, carrying with it the scent of pine and lake water. Nothing like the metallic tang of helicopter fuel or the burnt coffee smell of forward operating bases. This was different. This was earned. My phone hadn't buzzed in days. No reporters asking for comments, no old friends offering belated support. No desperate texts from unknown numbers. The story had run its course. Sarah faced her charges. The judge retired in disgrace. The lawyer lost his license. And me? I found my way to this dock this morning, this peace. Duke stretched and patted over, resting his head on my knee. Above us, an eagle circled lazy patterns against the brightening sky. My line drifted with the current, marking gentle arcs across the water's surface. And sitting there, watching the sun climb over my little piece of lakefront, I felt something settle inside me, something that had been rattling loose since that first courthouse summons. The water lay still now, mirror smooth in the morning light. Perfect for fishing. Perfect for reflecting. Perfect for remembering that sometimes the best victories come quiet, like dawn stealing over dark water. I adjusted my grip on the pole, felt the familiar weight of it. Duke's breathing came slow and steady against my leg. The eagle wheeled once more and disappeared behind the tree line. And in that moment of absolute clarity, I whispered what I'd known all along. Never bet against a man with nothing left to lose. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.